to Dead Time with your host, Holly Faust. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dead Time Tales. Now, this is our last episode for our first season because we're taking the summer off to travel to a few paranormal, metaphysical, and cryptid festivals. So come out and see us there. In the fall, we're going to be back with a whole new entire lineup of guests. So make sure you pay attention for that. Now, our guest today is Rissa Miller. She is an editor, an author, an herbalist, a seer, and a storyteller. Now, Rissa's storytelling expertise stems from extensive research into the esoteric history, including ghosts, witchcraft, cryptids, and folklore. She believes the most enduring stories teach us not only about humanity's past, but also it gives us reasons to reflect on our own present beliefs and realities. She also leads ghost tours and gives lively history talks. So, everybody, welcome Rissa to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Holly. I am super excited to be here.
I was so excited when we had actually talked about having you on because I watch for a lot of your events. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to any of them yet because you're for a lot further south from me. But I always see when you do events in Gettysburg. Gettysburg is like anybody who knows me, I always say people have Disney World, I have Gettysburg. Because that is my absolutely favorite place to be. I've had so many personal experiences there. And my son actually had his first psychic experience there.
Wow.
So yeah, he was a little boy when it happened. And so anytime anybody is doing anything there, that is like a place that's so close to my heart. And your topics that I see coming up always intrigue me, especially I seen you have one like on werewolves now.
I
So
do. And that
yeah,
one will be in Gettysburg this fall. So mark your calendar.
I'm gonna try because I know I've been wanting to get in to see Andy at the Ghost City tours,
Mm-hmm.
to bring some of my books to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get in. Hopefully, I'll be at the bash. So hopefully, we can connect again there. So I love the fact we kind of like have similar beliefs. From what I've seen like in history, because I'm a
Mm-hmm.
historian myself. I talk about demystifying ghost towns.
Mm-hmm.
I live near Centralia,
Oh,
and
that's
yeah,
so
I'm
cool.
I'm like 10 minutes away, and I see so many false stories being shared on the internet, especially when it comes to like paranormal stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and people don't understand that there's nothing left there really except for
Yeah.
maybe two or three houses. And
Mm-hmm.
I've paranormally investigated there with multiple teams, and we have got no evidence there of anything out of the ordinary. So what is like one of your favorite things as a storyteller that you'd like to share?
Oh, well, on a broader scale, I think one of my favorite things is when I get to sort of uproot someone's superstition. I absolutely love that because, I think almost everything that I talk about and that you talk about, there's history, but there's also lore.
Yeah.
And to understand folklore and superstition is such a missing part of our general history education. And so much of how we see the world really revolves around lore and belief. And, like take, for example, the Ouija board. I am not
Hmm.
superstitious about a Ouija board. I call it America's most feared piece of cardboard,
Yeah.
and which is ridiculous. Like, if you're not scared of like this piece of paper, you shouldn't be scared of a Ouija board.
Right.
No offense to those who have a paper phobia. Now, that said, that is one of the topics I talked about this year was the board. And I spent several years researching, and I conducted interviews. I did tons of history research, and I found that all of the, how do I want to say, fear around it is really just maintained by superstition, not by
Hmm.
any actual fact, data, or research. So, could you have a dark experience with it? Sure. Could you have a dark experience without it? Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people if you go looking for something bad, it will find you.
Hmm.
And you don't need a Ouija board to do it. You don't need a ghost town to do it. You don't need anything. You just need the will to find a bad experience. So, that said, I think that, my favorite moment in one of my talks is when people are like, oh, like, really? Like cats can't steal your breath. Like, no, they can't. Like I always tell everyone in my talks, like, I'll give you $50 if you could bring me a police report of death by cat stealing your breath.
That's astonishing because that, when I was a young mom,
Hmm.
I had cats. And I remember my mom always saying, "Don't let that cat near the baby, it'll steal his breath." And I was just like, My cat sleeps in the crib with my baby all the time. She protects him."
Hmm. Absolutely, they
So
do.
I'm like, I don't understand why you're, like, where did this come from? Like, and I know myself when I was pregnant, we had a large blackbird fly into the house. And I'm literally grabbing my belly saying, "That's an omen of death. It's an omen of, I'm indigenous." And so for us, as an indigenous woman, I'm a storyteller and a story keeper. And that's my job within our family unit. And for me, those are things that I remember my grandmother telling me these things.
Hmm.
And, it just stuck in my head. But that one with the cat, when you had said that, I laughed because I'm like, some things I can understand. Like my grandmother said, don't look at anybody's birthmarks when you're pregnant because that birthmark will show up on your baby. And I would tell her all the time, that's ridiculous. And then she showed me my aunt has this huge birthmark on her side. And I'm like, looking at it. And then I looked over at my father, and my father has this gigantic same birthmark on his arm.
Interesting.
And she said she was so hyper focused on that when she was pregnant for my aunt
Uh-huh.
that it caused her to be born with it. And I don't believe that. I just think it, but I just thought it was interesting because that was the only time someone could ever prove to me one of those
Right.
superstitions having a
Right.
basis in fact. So I like that because the Ouija board, especially in the paranormal community, is met with such, like, I have multiple Ouija boards.
Yeah.
I am a Ouija board addict. I even have one that was created from a piece of wood my grandfather brought from Ireland.
That's
One
amazing.
one was created, like, him and my grandmother both brought wood from their farm when they came here in the early 1940s. And my grandfather's actually was made into a Ouija board. My grandmother's is the Last Supper. So I have two extremes of belief there, and I have both pieces.
That's really
Yeah,
cool.
the Last Supper piece hangs, just like my grandmother's did in my kitchen.
Hmm.
It sparks a lot of conversations when everybody knows my path in life, and then they see that and they're like, but yeah, so like that part of it is just, you know, so many people, I tell people all the time, a spirit board or a talking board or a Ouija board is no different than using a pendulum, no
Exactly.
different than getting an EVP recording,
Right.
no different than using a REM pod.
Hmm.
You're still looking to make some kind of connection
Hmm.
that can
Absolutely.
open you up. So like I don't understand. I always tell people the fear came from mainstream media.
The fear actually came from a movie in 1973. It's called The Exorcist, and
I
that's
know
the
that
first.
movie well.
Yep, it's the first time I can tell you this answer. It's the first time that it was portrayed in the media in a negative way. And now its role in the movie was very small, and it was
Right.
actually not even in the book. It was added at the last minute because they wanted to use an everyday object, and it was an everyday object. It was sold better than Monopoly the year before in the United States, and that says a lot. So everybody had one of these. It wasn't considered scary or demonic or negative in any way. It was a regular household object. So they used this regular household object to create terror, which is the most effective way,
Oh,
really. I
definitely.
mean, it's not like some exotic thing that you're only going to find, like, maybe once in a lifetime. No, everybody had one. So that made it really terrifying, kind of like the shower scene in Psycho. Nobody
Yeah.
was scared of a shower until they saw Norman Bates coming into the bathroom, you
Yes,
know?
exactly. I was a child the first
Yep,
time I seen that film, and I
yep.
still have to have a clear shower curtain.
Yeah, I always look. If the shower curtain's not clear, I always look as
Yep,
if I
or
could
I
do
keep
anything
it
at that
cracked
point.
open, keep it
Yep,
cracked open to the point where you could see.
yep,
Yeah, and I never really thought of it that way because when you think about it, that is the movie, like a poltergeist.
yeah.
From that moment on in my life, and I was very young when my brother and sister made me watch that, and from that moment in my life, I had to sleep with my closet door open.
Yeah.
And I never
Poltergeist had
associated
a
that.
lot of things in it, like the TV and the doll, and like, yeah, there were a
The
lot of
worst
everyday
part to
objects.
me was that closet door, because when I was a kid, my room was set up very similar to that bedroom, and I had the closet door like that. And so I obsessed to even like it took my husband and I have been married 25 years, and it took like probably the first, I'd say 15, for me to be able to sleep with my closet door closed. And we have 3 closets in our bedroom. And I would crack them all open, and he's
Yeah,
like, "This is ridiculous." But yeah, so I never thought about that basis, in using something that every day, and it does elicit fear, because I know like so many people within the community that have an obsessive fear when I mention, the Ouija board. And I'm like, "What?"
absolutely. It's
I don't
completely
understand
irrational
it.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've watched The Exorcist. I've read the book, and I
Yeah.
know the story of
Hmm.
the Mount Rainier case. Being a paranormal investigator, I know the case it's based on.
Hmm.
So for me, it just didn't, that part of it never clicked in my head. And I think it's because the first horror movie I ever saw was Poltergeist.
Really?
Yeah, I was little when that came out, and my brother and sister insisted on me having to watch it. And then, of course, all of the Halloween and Friday the 13th films in the 80s. Like, to this day, I'm still deathly afraid of Michael Myers. I'm a grown adult woman, and if I'm at a Halloween parade and Michael Myers comes by, I run. Like, I do a metaphysical event every month
Yeah.
in Leesport, and the girl that runs the concession stand has a Michael Myers set up, and I make my kids go get me food. I am just that afraid. I will not stand there for more than a minute or two, and it's an insane fear. But something's in there from my childhood that says he's fearful.
Sure. I mean, and we're often taught what to be afraid of,
Mhm.
and as you said in my introduction, I'm a ghost tour guide, and a lot of people come onto a ghost tour, which is mostly history, as you probably
Mm.
know.
Yes.
I'd say it's like 80% history, 20% paranormal lore. And people they're scared. And I'm
Right.
like, really, nothing's gonna happen. I mean, unless, like real life happens, but
Right.
probably nothing is gonna happen. Um, every so many tours, somebody gets a questionable picture,
Right.
but that's it. Nothing else ever.
Yeah.
Well,
I've
I
only
lie. Once or
experienced twice.
twice. Something,
Yeah.
a few times.
I had 2 experiences. Like, I do a lot of ghost tours when I go to Gettysburg.
Mhm.
I did them in Baltimore. We did, like, the Edgar Allan Poe
Oh,
walk in
yeah.
Baltimore.
Yep.
I've done them in Strasbourg,
Mhm.
when we went to the railroad there. So, that's one of the things I do. We did multiple ones in Salem. But we had 2 experiences in Gettysburg. One was a personal experience I had,
Mhm.
and that was in the Farnsworth house in the basement.
Not surprising.
And yeah, right? And, I'm sitting there, and I didn't realize it. My son had gotten mini balls at one of the gift shops, and they were in my pocket, and I kept feeling something messing around in my pocket. And then I was also like, which you'll probably understand to go with the story. At one time in my life, I was a nurse in an emergency room. And so I kept feeling something going in my pocket, and it felt like they were picking up the mini balls and putting them down and playing with them. Then when we were leaving, they told us the story about the little boy that tends to go towards people in the health industry. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe, because it was so odd. And then the other experience was actually my son's. We were up at Seminary Ridge,
Okay.
and
Yep. Another hot spot.
yep, we were by the tree where I guess there have been people that have seen a soldier. And he kept running over to the tree, and he would start talking and laughing and giggling and then running back over to us. And all we seen, like when I had taken a picture in that area, was this haze
Hmm.
by the tree, and everything else was clear. But those are the only 2 times I've ever had experiences,
Yeah.
on a
So
ghost tour.
on my ghost tours, so I do ghost tours in York, Pennsylvania, and in Ellicott City, Maryland.
Okay.
Although one of my talks in Gettysburg, something happened. I'm trying to think of what's the juiciest story to tell you. I'm going to go with one from Ellicott City. So Ellicott City, Maryland, if you don't know, it is on the same bedrock as Gettysburg,
Mm-hmm.
which gives it a similar haunted vibe.
Right.
Now, there was no war there, but during the Civil War, there were a lot of hospitals there. Excuse me. So a lot of soldiers died there. It was also part of the War of 1812. So it has this dark history as well as being just a beautiful historic town. If you've not been to Ellicott City, you should check it out. I think
Yeah,
you
I
would
have
love
not
it.
been there yet, so I'm gonna have to put that on my list of places to go.
Add it to your list. There is a haunted tour. Actually, there's several haunted tours you can take, and there is a free to visit old railroad station. In fact, the B&O is the first passenger rail station in the United States,
Wow.
and it was connected by 13 lucky miles to Baltimore originally. So I was giving a talk inside the B&O, and it wasn't a talk about the ghost of the B&O, Charlie. Charlie is definitely one of my favorite ghosts. And I guess I had not paid him his due, and I was in his house literally talking about, in fact, Edgar Allan Poe that night. And he decided to make himself known. And two women who were sitting on the end of the aisle both felt an icy cold hand touch their shoulder at the same time, as if somebody walked up and just touched them both. And they both jumped up and screamed. They weren't together, they didn't know each other. And they were like, "What just happened? Somebody touched me." I was like, "Oh, it was probably just Charlie. Don't worry about it." And everybody's like dead quiet. They're like, "Who's Charlie?" I was like, "Oh, he's the ghost here. This is his place. He was the station master during the time of the Civil War. He's the haunting." I was like, "I forgot to tell you his story. He's just letting me know." And I proceeded to tell the story. Now, those two ladies left. They did not stick around. But they sure did get their money's worth for a scary time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I always say, why go on a ghost walk or a haunted walk if you don't want to know or experience something? Because there's always the chance, because these aren't given in locations that are free of anything haunting.
Right.
They're historical talks, but
Yeah.
they also have that, predisposition towards, possibly something could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So in Gettysburg, I do all my talks at the Homestead Orphanage. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I am extreme. I had a horrible experience
Oh,
in the basement
what
at
else
the
are the talks in the
orphanage.
basement?
Yes, I was actually on one of the benches in the
Uh
basement
huh.
there, and they were sharing the story about, the back rooms and what had happened. And we were there on a field trip with a paranormal group that I was a member of. And I
Mm-hmm.
seen a couple of the girls turn around and say, "Did you just say we need to get out of here?" And I'm like, not out loud. I didn't say it. And the next thing I knew, it didn't happen to me physically. It was more energetically. I felt my head getting bashed off the wall behind me.
E.
And so, of course, I fly out of the building. I'm like, I cursed my brains out, needing an effing cigarette, and, go flying. And then they said, "Well, do you know what happened down there like a week or two ago?" And, the girl that was running the tour was like, "Well, no, what?" And they said, "Well, a guy was down there provoking Rosa, and she banged his head off the wall until it drew blood." And so they said I was energetically feeling what had
What had
happened right where
happened?
I was sitting. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I've had a lot of experiences in that basement, but I'm interested to see what yours have been, because I haven't been back there. Probably the last time I was there was right before COVID.
Okay. So I'm new there. I'm the newest member of their team there, and I do my esoteric history talks in that big back room in the
Mhm,
orphanage. It's a newer part of it. I think it was built on back when it was first a museum.
mhm.
And so I was giving my very first talk there, and it was completely packed. I think we were sold over what we thought we were going to sell, and like people were standing in the back of the room. And all of a sudden, I'm talking, and there's bells behind me, and I turned to my point of contact who works there, and I was like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "I don't know." And then we hear footsteps behind me too. There's nobody back there. I guess the children started running around and like ringing the doorbell. Like they have actual bells hanging on the door
Right.
while I was talking. So there was all this, activity, and you could hear doors. And I always told people, I'm like, "So you got an extra show tonight from me and the ghosts."
Yeah, that's what
So,
I tell people all the time because of being someone like part of one of the gifts that I have is I experience what
mhm.
people have experienced. Like we were in the Jenny Wade house, and at the
That's
time
a tough one.
the way it was set up, you really couldn't tell where the kitchen was or anything, and we were just standing in this room. I got was real angry because some of the kids that were on the tour were playing with the animatronics, and this was an actual investigation. And
Uh-huh.
instead of like trying to investigate, they were pushing the buttons on the little, scaring everybody. And I'm just standing there talking to my friend, and I'm like, I wonder where, she was shot.
Mhm.
And then the next thing I knew, I'm on the floor. I felt something pierce my back, and I was on the floor. My friend moved the door that was separating the 2 rooms, and there was the bullet hole that lined
Yeah.
up exactly with my back.
I know
And
exactly
she
the
said,
place you mean.
"Yep,"
Yep.
she said, "I guess that was where."
That's the spot.
Yep, she said, "I guess that was where." And so, like, I try to shield when I go into these locations, but then I get intrigued and I want to feel what's going on. So that was like one of the times that I was like, yeah, I shouldn't have been that. I should have done a little bit more researching where I was at when I actually made that question, because I know from private home investigations, I had done a home and I kept getting extreme abdominal pain, but I would be
Mhm.
okay the minute we walked out. And as soon as I go back into the house, it would start again. And then we had found out through research, of course, that one of the owners way back when the home was first built died from dysentery.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it was just like, okay, now I know what that feels like. I never want to feel that again.
Yeah,
And I always say, I think half of the intestinal problems I have is because of the experiences I've had in the paranormal.
that could be.
But yeah,
That could definitely be.
Gettysburg, like I said, that place, I do like Gettysburg and then down into Antietam
Mhm.
and then into Baltimore. Like those are some of my favorite areas
Mhm.
to investigate, because like I go to Salem and I try to tell people
Keep
that's
keep
not even.
going. You're gonna
Yeah,
love Ellicott City.
yeah, I'm gonna have to, because the only reason why I got to experience Baltimore so much is my daughter was a patient at Hopkins
Oh,
when she was a baby. So
yeah.
we spent a lot of time there. Like we
Yeah.
pretty much were back and forth for years with her. So I did get to experience Baltimore a lot because I lived right there by the hospital for the longest
Right.
time. And yeah, so I'm gonna have to, because I mean, growing up, my family, my mom's brother lived down in Norfolk.
Mhm.
So we spent a lot of time in that part of Virginia, like Williamsburg and,
Mhm.
all of that. And that's, I think, where I got my love of the old historical stuff, because
Yep.
we would also go to Philly a lot.
Mhm. Another great
And
spot.
yeah, and I had never known a world outside of that, like, historical side of things, and I thought every big city was like that. So, like, I spent my summers in New York City and Manhattan, that was nothing like that. So I learned very quickly, well, maybe it's only in Pennsylvania or, on the East Coast or, like, in the colonies, but I'm like, New York was a colony.
Yeah, it
So I
was New
said,
Amsterdam. Yeah.
right. So I'm like, I don't know why, they didn't have the same type of, maybe there wasn't enough that happened there, but you would think with Ellis Island there would
Actually,
have
I think
been.
there's a lot that happened there. I think with all of the noise of New York City, it's hard to feel it.
Right.
It's just there's just so much built on top of it that it's
Oh,
hard to find it.
100%.
Whereas I think if you go into some of the buildings, like the Hotel Chelsea, for example, you would definitely get that hit, but not necessarily just
Yes,
outside because
I
there's too
haven't
much
been.
going on.
Yeah, I haven't been in, like, my aunt and uncle lived in Hell's Kitchen
Hmm.
until it got really, really bad, and then they moved out to Long Island.
Right.
And but I when we go, we spend a lot of our time in Manhattan, but we spend it like in Times Square with the newer hotels and
Yeah.
the hustle and bustle. But yet I can feel a difference when I go
Hmm.
out to the island.
Oh yeah, I'm
Because
sure.
I was like, I'm entrailed with all of that. So of course I had to go to Amityville. As an adult paranormal investigator, what is the first place I wanted to do when I was in Manhattan for an investigation on Long Island? I have to go to Amityville. So I literally made my friend drive me all the way to Amityville so I could hang out the window of her car and take pictures of the house. And
I've seen it too. I've been there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and then we drove all the way to the Hamptons
Hmm.
because I had to. So, but now, when I had seen you were doing the discussion on werewolves. That is really an intriguing one for me because, we do have a subculture in the United States of Therian people. And so cause that was one that I really want to try to get to. So I don't know if I want to ask too many questions about it, but at the
Like no
same time,
spoilers.
yeah, and that's what I'm thinking, but then I know so many people that don't have the access, like a lot of my listeners that don't have the access to come and see a talk.
Right.
And so is it more your talk more on a discussion on the Therian side of things or like a Lycan side of things or neither?
Okay, so my talk starts with actual firsthand accounts from Pennsylvania of
Okay.
seeing upright canine humanoid figures. And then we get into very ancient history, going back to around 3000 BC. And I travel across the world during the talk about the history of shapeshifters, not just wolves,
Okay.
but all shapeshifters, and
All
how
right.
it is part of the human condition, this
Yes, we
story.
have them in our indigenous community. They're flesh
Yes.
pedestrians.
So almost every indigenous community has some answer to the word shapeshifter.
Yep.
And now in some they're protectors, and in some they're evil spirits, and it
Right.
that varies wildly.
Yes,
And
it
then I
does.
and then I talk about the actual history of humans with wolves. There was a time during the Great Wolf Hunt that they were eradicated from both Europe and America, which is why they're endangered now.
Mm-hmm.
And I explain how and why that happened. That some of the photos that go with that are disturbing. To be honest, I almost hesitated to even put them in the presentation because I knew there would be very sensitive people who would be shocked to see the piles of wolf bodies. And I was, to be totally frank. And because I personally believe everything in the ecosystem belongs there,
Mm-hmm.
including our predators.
Yep.
So it was an interesting part of history to understand. And I then go into the more modern lore, and that involves a lot of the story of the Lycan wolves comes
Right.
from entertainment. It
Correct.
comes from books and movies.
Yep.
And interestingly, some of the more early books are about female she wolves. And I love that. And somehow we've really gotten away from that in modern times. And it's become
Yeah, a
like
lot of it focuses on men
it
nowadays.
becomes like the shirtless guy, you know? And I was surprised. I was going through my presentation. I'm like, why are there so many pictures of shirtless buff men? But there
And
were.
that's where we went to with our history. It just seemed
Yeah,
like, yeah.
it's true. And I mean, some of the people in the presentation thought that was fine. They were like, "Thank you, Rissa." But also, I did circle back, and I spent a good deal of time talking about the she wolf and her place in the story. I did find several really good ones in entertainment and history to talk about as well. And I think that in the talk, I probably end up really feeling sympathetic towards the werewolf, to be honest. I feel like it's a story, like I said, that is just part of the human story. And I have collected a number of. I talk also about the difference between a dog man and a werewolf.
That's what I was gonna say because I know in the cryptid community, when you were
Yep.
talking like about a bipedal, a
Mhm. Upright.
upright dog type of creature, and I have interviewed a couple people in the cryptid community where, especially out on the west side of PA,
Yes.
where they talk about the dog man sightings.
Well, the one thing that they all tell me when I ask, like, are you sure it was a dog man? Could it have been a werewolf? They usually like, I don't know. I mean, how could they honestly know? I mean,
Mhm.
usually most of them see them for a second. It's like a
Right.
fleeting thing, or it's kind of a shadowy figure in the dark, or something like that. I also tell Maryland some of the Maryland werewolf lore as well in this presentation because it's right on the line, right? We're very
Right.
close. So, I do talk about the theoretical differences between them, but the truth is, we don't really know. We don't really know if they're different or if they're related. They could
Right.
be. And so I do entertain all of that in the talk as well. It's a, so to speak, there's a lot of meat on the bone with this one,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying
Definitely.
to be, I'm not trying to
I'm
make
gonna
it.
have to watch your page because like I definitely like at first it's in Gettysburg, which for me, it's an hour and a half to 2 hour
Yeah,
drive, but it's always worth it for me to I can do a day trip there, you
yeah, and you
know,
could get
and
dinner, make it an event.
yeah, like, and I keep telling my husband, like, I wanna go for, like, a couple's weekend away because we never, celebrate our anniversary or anything because it's, like, right with our youngest child's birthday, like, they're right
Oh,
there. So it's like, we always, focus on them and we don't focus on us, and I
yeah,
keep saying, "They're all adults now, we need to just go away
yeah.
and
Take care of
have."
yourselves.
Yeah, and that's like the kids always say, "Well, where do you wanna go?" I'm like, "I'd go to Gettysburg." And my husband's like, "Of course you will." I'm like, "Wait a minute. Alright, we spent our honeymoon in Williamsport because of baseball." So, we did the whole Little League World
Oh
Series.
yeah.
We
Mhm.
did the whole Little League World Series thing for for our honeymoon. So, yeah, I'm like, I think I get to choose now,
Yeah, I think it's your turn.
our second one. And, but yeah, I just because that topic, when I had seen it, because so many people don't discuss those things.
Yeah,
And, like when you talk about the history of the wolf, we had a lot of that same history, when it came to the buffalo.
it's true.
And, like we're just now
Mhm.
starting to see buffalo again being born out of captivity.
Right.
And it's astonishing because, a lot of our teachings about the white buffalo and the white animals are starting to come to fruition. And that's what I like to talk about, when I do talks, is some of our lores and our beliefs and how we're seeing them come to life in modern times, like for the
Right.
first time in generations. And the other thing that I do a lot of focus on is urban legends,
Mm-hmm.
because urban legends have such a tie-in to true crime, but also to the paranormal.
I
Like,
agree.
yeah, it's like you hear a woman in white story,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some everywhere. But if you really research the history, you will find, a crime that occurred or an accident or something that happened in that location that started that woman in white story. So, yeah, I think us storytellers are very important, and there's not enough of us in the world anymore.
Yeah. No, I
Gettysburg has
agree.
tons.
Yes, Gettysburg does have more than its share of really talented storytellers, and I feel like part of the reason for that is, as far as the communities having lost their storytellers, is that we now turn to either like television or our phones
Yep.
for that same experience, and it's not the same. It's not the same as hearing somebody talk, as being in the moment with them, being able to ask a question in real time or
Mhm.
share your own experience in real time, and being sitting in front of a television screen and watching versus sitting in a room or being on a tour or sitting by a fire and sharing a story. So very different, so very different.
Yeah, I like, I anytime something happens in our family, I'm the one that everybody contacts because
Mhm.
I'm the one that has to make it history for
Yeah.
us. Like, I had several cousins that were in Daypal when they were, protesting against the pipeline.
Mhm.
And, they would like call me up and say, "Well, look at, my one cousin, like, look at my body. They shot me with rubber bullets and look at what it did." And, you know, and I still share those stories with people because if we don't look at our history, we're bound to repeat the bad stuff.
Which we do.
And which we do because I think, and a lot of it is becoming more and more prevalent because our storytellers are slowly disappearing, and we're relying on people who really shouldn't be telling the stories because they kind of warp them to their own wants and
Yeah.
needs, and instead of sharing the true stories. Like, I share, this what I can of my familial history on both sides. My grandparents came here from Ireland
Mhm.
when my grandmother was pregnant with my dad and gave birth on the ship on the way over here.
Whoa.
Right. And like, what,
Whoa.
that doesn't even happen anymore, but that was a
Wow.
very much a reality for immigrants in the 1940s and well before that, when they were immigrating here from Ireland and England and Europe, all over Europe. And my grandmother was lucky. She survived. My father survived. And, they got here and they lived here and they had families here. And then on my mother's side, the older children in that family all survived residential schools. And, we don't share those stories enough because they
Agreed.
don't talk about them. They
Agreed.
don't talk about I have a ancestor that's buried at Carlisle.
Mm.
So, it's just I think we've gotten away from learning from that history, and it bothers me a lot because I see the way the tides are shifting, and I think we've forgotten
We have. We
what has
become,
happened.
what's the word? I don't know if the word's complacent or comfortable.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both. I think we just wanna live our own lives, and we don't care anymore about
Hmm.
what's happening to the person next to us. And sadly, that's what happened in every other time in history when we've seen, mass death amongst
Yep.
races of people. And, it's scary to like, I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime,
Right. But
you
here we
know,
are.
but here we are, and we're witnessing it on multiple fronts. It's not
Right.
just happening here, it's happening here in our own country. So, but, so I appreciate you for being a storyteller and sharing and doing the research, because so many
Yes.
times people want to share the story, but they don't share the entire story. And that's what I have found, like I said, with my work with Centralia. They have bits and pieces correct, but the big story they have wrong because
Right.
they want to sensationalize it to be Silent Hill or to be one of these, horror movies, and it's not.
Well,
This
there are
this
plenty of real horror movies out there,
I
you
tell
know?
people all the time, you want a haunted ghost town in this same area. There's a little unknown town called Elvira
I've heard of
that
it.
it was called Weiss Town, and then it was Elvira. It is now state game lands, which means it's free to go and roam around up until a point, because you hit a fence, and that's the prison, because the federal prison is also on what was Elvira. My niece actually got married at the old church that was part of the town Elvira, which is on the prison grounds, because her partner, her husband, actually worked for the prison at the time they got married. So they got permission to have their wedding and their reception right there at that church. And but this town has a haunted history.
Hmm.
There has been Bigfoot sightings in this town. There are
Whoa.
bunkers that are very similar to what you would see when you go to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Mothman. So
Hmm.
it has a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But yet they don't want to hear that because it's not mainstream and it hasn't been popularized like Centralia. And Centralia, honestly, the people that own that, it's a lot of it is private property.
Yeah, I get you. Because
And
there are
what's
a lot
not
of places that are private property and folks
right.
still want to go wander
And
around there.
and
So
a
the owner
lot of
doesn't want you
time.
there. They don't
Right.
want you there.
And a lot of the other stuff is owned by the state, and they literally
Mhm.
have signs up telling you that,
Yeah.
do not trespass. And I'm like, that's a for me, like, if it says do not trespass, I ain't going there.
No, I'm with you. Here in York County, there's a site called the Seven Gates of Hell,
Mhm.
and it is privately owned property. And they will call the cops on you in a minute.
Yep.
And it's entirely an urban legend. There's nothing about
A
it in the
complete urban
history.
legend.
Nothing about it in history is true at all. There was never a psychiatric ward there. There was never a fire there. There was a doctor who lived there. He was a war hero and a cardiologist. And he hated that he was tied in with that legend. I mean, he's since passed, but he and his wife are both since passed. But still, it was like they didn't want to be associated with it.
And you
And
wonder, like, how something like that got started. Because living up where I lived, I grew, lived up in Northeast PA for the longest
uh-huh,
time up above Scranton. And I knew about the 7 Gates of Hell, and, my friends would wanna go there, and I'm like, "But it's private property." Like,
yeah,
I guess I was one of those ghost hunters that, like, I like to do urban exploration, don't get me wrong, but not if it's somewhere where I'm gonna get arrested.
yeah, it's so
And
not worth it. So not worth
I
it.
think it came down to, my actual I studied criminal justice. So I
Yeah,
think
that'll do
that's
it.
where that came from. Is like, I don't want to go to jail, man. That's what happens when you go to those places and you get caught. Because I'm like, I grew up, in the vicinity. We had like so many shuttered state hospitals. And yeah, I would love to get into some of them because I do, for some reason, have an affinity towards the psychiatric institutions like Penhurst
Yeah,
always drew me in. And it's because I knew those stories because I was,
yeah.
a little girl and heard them. And then when I got involved in the field, I had worked with people
Hmm.
that had actually had ties to that place. And
It's not that long ago that Penhurst was open.
right, exactly. And that's what I tell people, like, like the places like that draw me in, but they're also legal for me to go to.
That's the thing. Well, Penhurst is now privately owned.
Yeah,
So,
I actually was just there for their paranormal conference.
but yeah,
I
they had
spent
a
the
Paracon. I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was there for the whole weekend and I came home. I have never been so sick in my entire life.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I felt fine the whole time I was there. Sunday morning, I woke up with an awful pain in my head that lasted for almost 2 weeks. And I don't know if it was the energy there because I was getting conflicted energy. I was
Yeah.
getting a happy energy at certain times. And then at other times, I was getting this like being harmed type of energy that I was feeling in there. So it was like conflicting energies too.
So, interesting side note. I went to Penhurst for one of their haunted experiences, and it was packed. There were tons of people there.
Oh, I bet.
And I went through the haunt. It was the commercial haunt part. It was really
Hmm.
fun. It was well done. And although I will say one of their haunts smacked me in the face with a pillow and broke my glasses.
Oh, no.
But that said, I came down with viral laryngitis and I lost my voice for four
That's what
weeks.
happened to me. I couldn't talk or anything.
4 weeks, I lost my voice, which to me is my whole job.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't work for 4 weeks, and then it turns out it did actually slightly damage my vocal cords. So yeah, I'm not in a rush to go back to Penhurst.
And see,
And
I'm the opposite. Like I cannot wait for next year. I'm actually trying to get people to go and do an actual investigation there
oh well,
because
that would be probably different. I don't necessarily want to be in there with hordes of people again.
right.
But yeah, I've never had viral laryngitis before. I had no idea how painful it was.
Oh yeah, I was on a Z pack because I can't take any antibiotics. I'm allergic to everything, and like I'm still suffering.
Yeah,
Like, because whatever was happening when I went on the Z packet, now everything's just loosened up and gone
yeah,
crazy. And I think it was the weather, the outdoors. Like I was even inside a building. So I didn't spend a lot of time out on the actual grounds except for when I went to see a few people. But I never experienced that after an event like that. And I'm just like, "Oh my god." And I ended up where I couldn't my husband was like, "What's wrong with your throat?" I'm like, "I don't know, man."
it's
So I can
something
and
interesting.
I
We had
don't do the
similar
haunts.
experiences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't do the haunts because I seen that they're advertising for their haunt now, and
Mhm.
I told my kids, and they're all like, "Oh, well, we nope, 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 I'm good. I don't do those." I did one, up in what was it, Stroudsburg area? It was called the Sailorsburg. It was called the Hotel of Horror. It's like
Oh,
3
I
or
don't know
4
that one.
I was 3 or 4 floors of haunted house.
Mhm.
And it was, the reason why we had gone there is because there was a paranormal celebrity there,
Mhm.
and Lorraine Warren, and I wanted to talk to them about my son and what he was experiencing because I didn't know how to help him. So I braved that haunted house and I have never gone to another one since. I take my kids. We have one here in Elysburg that is very, very popular. People come from all over for Halloween. I take them. I sit out in the parking lot and I go to all the food trucks. And I don't even like eat half the stuff anymore, but I enjoy to have like I everything I bring home for my husband. What I don't eat, he gets. So now he eats after me, and it used to be the other way. And so yeah, I don't do that at all. Now, besides, your history talks, I know you do a few other things. So can
I
you let
do.
our viewers know a little bit about some of the other stuff you do?
Well, I think probably one of the most unique things I do is that I'm a tea leaf reader. And
That's a
there,
dying trade.
there aren't that many of us around. I am fully self-taught, and as are most tea leaf readers. And it is a form of scrying.
Mhm.
And basically, if folks aren't familiar with it or they haven't seen it in Harry Potter, you drink a cup of tea that's loose in the cup, and then you flip it and pull it back, and it has patterns on the inside. So it's a very simplified way to explain it, because then the tasseographer, or the tea leaf reader, then reads the patterns on the inside and interprets them into a divination reading. So there's no way to memorize anything for it. You have to literally have a symbol language already in your head, which is probably one of the biggest parts of learning to do it. And you have to be able to interpret those symbols. And I started teaching myself accidentally when I was 16. I was gifted loose tea for the first time. Now I'm 50. So when I was 16, loose tea was a rare and special experience,
Yep.
right? It's not like now where you can get it at the
Could get it
local.
anywhere. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you
You
had to
can,
get that special back
yeah.
then.
Yeah, that was mail ordered back
Yeah.
then. And it came with a metal teaspoon, which is what you put the loose tea in. And that thing broke right away. It was a total piece of crap. And the tea went into the cup. But it was so special. I was like, well, I'm going to drink it anyway. It's too fancy. I'm not going to waste it. And then I noticed that the tea leaves started sticking to the side of my little cup. And I looked at it and I said, that looks like a cat. And the next, like, a little bit down, looked like a basket of flowers. And my mom said, well, that's a form of divination. So to preface that, I come from a line of tarot readers. I'm one of many in a line, and she's like, maybe that could be a thing that you would learn. So, in a form of rebellion, I decided that I was going to learn to be a tea leaf reader, and I was no longer going to read tarot. I had been learning tarot since I was a child. I already knew how to read tarot at that point, but I wanted to be defiant. So I did. And I started constantly looking at tea and figuring it out. And first, I learned to see the symbols in the cup. That was step one. And then step two was figuring out what they meant. And I just started creating a symbol language of my own. And it is still the one I use. And when I teach tea leaf reading, it's the one I teach. And I always tell people, you will personalize it as you go if you keep it up, because it is a practice. And so yeah, but I actually did go back to reading tarot, by the way. I
I
didn't stay defiant forever.
right. Yeah, and I was defiant that I didn't wanna read tarot, so I started reading oracle.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, "No, no, I don't do that," because people would be I wasn't a reader who read according to any type of suits or major arcana, minor arcana. I read what the cards spoke to me.
Uh-huh.
So I would have people say, "Well, that's not what that card means." And I said, "But that's not what the card's telling me."
Right.
So
Well,
I
I think
would
when
that's
you
why I
go
went
to
to
a
oracle.
reader, no matter what kind of reader it is, you have to understand that you're seeing it through them as the medium.
Right. And and that's why I think I've really pushed more towards mediumship.
Hmm.
Because the cards were telling me something, and then I started slowly realizing it wasn't the cards telling me, but the people around the
Hmm.
people I was reading. Because my daughter actually got me a tea leaf reading cup for Christmas this year because I've
Yeah,
always been intrigued by, because I do something that you don't hear a lot of, but I do pyromancy.
I do as well, but I
I
use the
read the
smoke.
fire. I read the
Yeah,
fire.
I read the smoke, you read the
Yeah.
fire. Yep.
I do fire readings, and it's something that I don't offer a lot because not many places allow open flames.
Same.
But I do offer it privately for my clients. So she figured, "Oh, well, you like that. Maybe, I always talked about tea leaf reading and how always wanted to learn it and how I thought it was the coolest thing. So she got me a cup, and I'm like, "Yeah, but that's following someone else's interpretation." And she said, "But it can start you out somewhere."
It
I'm like,
can.
"Yeah, it's true. It can. It can give me." I have it sitting here in my office, and I keep saying, because I have tons of loose tea now. Like when like I'm the same age as you, and we only had tea in bags, and my grandparents being Irish, that's all we ever had at their
Yeah.
house was tea. And so when I first started, my cousin from France brought me Turkish tea. and
Oh, strong.
it comes in a big gold bag, and she would bring it every time she had visited France. And I have so much of it still from her. And that's when I really, like, came addicted to loose teas. I have loose tea everywhere in my house. I have tea balls. I have teapots that you can watch them, the
Yep.
glass teapots from Germany. So, yeah, and so maybe I'll get into it. I don't know. I know there's not many people that do it anymore.
No, there are very few of us. And it's not a skill that people seek out that much.
Mm-mm.
When Harry Potter was more popular, yes, because Professor Trelawney does it.
Yeah, that was
And
her.
that
The
was her.
Grimm, it's
The
the
Grimm.
Grimm.
I've
I'm
never
just
seen the Grimm.
rereading. I'm rereading the books, so
Yeah,
that's why I'm actually on that book right now. So, I think it's kind of funny, but I love that,
yeah.
because there are, like, people focus so much right now on tarot, like, "Oh, I
Well,
want
it's just what's popular right now at the moment.
right. Well, yeah, and that's what I tell people because I actually do witches' ruins.
Hmm.
And I offer that a lot, and I do pendulums.
Hmm.
I have an automatic pendulum.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I love it, and I'm just like, anybody can use this. You
Yeah.
don't have to know what you're doing. All you have to do is ask the questions, and it'll tell you yes, no, maybe, redefine. And I'm like, even if you just start on a practice, once in the morning, ask it a question. It'll start your day. Like, I'm big into pushing people to find the diviner within themselves, or like, yeah, we focus a lot with our witches a PA group.
Hmm.
I run our prognosticators group
Okay.
because I'm like always the one saying, no, don't, make sure you know who you're getting your readings off of, because there's too many scammers on the internet.
There are, and it's hard from the outside to know what you're looking at.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm like, if someone automatically tells you you're cursed, run.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and we're getting a little bit close to our hour, so
Oh, okay.
yeah, I have, thankfully it tells me, because I wasn't paying attention a couple weeks ago, and I went 2.5 hours, and YouTube was not happy with that at all.
Yeah.
So, but if you could tell people where they could find you, I know where I can find you. So,
Sure. My website is teandsmoke.com. Usual spelling of everything. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. I do have a YouTube channel, but I don't update it probably as often as you do. And if you're interested in a ghost tour from me in Pennsylvania, my PA ghost tours are at hauntedpa.online.
and I will have all those links in the description for both the podcast and on the YouTube channel. So, you guys, if you want to be able to reach out and get further information, because I think everybody should do a history tour if they have never done it. Yeah, especially the historical. I always call them ghost tours,
Hmm.
because I think I've done both in Salem. I've done,
Yeah,
quote unquote, their history tour, and I've done their ghost tour. And I actually learned more history
on the
on
ghost
the
tour.
ghost tour than I did on the historical tour. And that's what I loved about that, because
Yes.
when I gone to Salem, we actually stay in the historical district in one of the
Yeah,
Airbnbs
that's
there.
fun.
So,
It's
yeah,
fun.
the last time we went, we were actually on the history tour, our house. So we were hiding in the house. It was Halloween week. And we would, like, hide and, like, shoot lights out at people and stuff like that. Just to
That's a wild time to go to Salem. I prefer to go any other time.
I do too, but I had to experience it once.
Okay, that's
And
fair.
we just so happened to go the year they opened everything back up after COVID. So
Okay,
there
that's a
was
lot. Yeah,
250,000 people there that weekend, and you could tell,
yeah,
because there were still lines for the stores, because they were still limiting the amount of people in the store at once. There were still mask requirements,
yeah.
and I always tell people, do it once. And, well, do I think I'll ever do it again for Halloween? Probably not, but I
Yeah,
did
I went
experience
to
it.
Sleepy Hollow once in October. I would never do it
I
again.
love that town too.
Oh, I love it
I
there.
actually went
But
there as a kid in school. It was one of our field trips in high school when we were learning about Washington Irving.
oh, what a great
So,
field trip.
yeah, we actually went there and did the whole school thing that they do, where they show you the films and talk about the stories, and that's actually what drew me to Salem, was the House of the Seven Gables.
Hmm.
And then learning more. My brother-in-law lives 30 minutes outside the city, so I got to go there a lot more because of going to visit them, and then really immersing myself in the history and,
Hmm.
learning how so much of it actually happened in Danvers and
Hmm.
not in the commercial district of Salem. And I'm just like, but it was fun to be there on Halloween and be with all the Salem witches doing a ritual in the town
Wow.
square. That was the most exciting and
Yeah, yeah.
powerful experience I had ever experienced. Like hundreds upon hundreds of witches being led by the Salem witches and doing a ritual somewhere where years ago we were looked upon poorly. Even though they weren't witches, they were still killing them because they believed they were.
Right.
Um, to be able to, I often wonder. I say, I wonder what those ancestors feel like when they see us all here dressed as witches, running around with our brooms and doing rituals in the middle of the square. So, but yeah, and I'd love to thank you for being on. I really enjoyed it. I love anytime I get. We don't talk history enough in the paranormal. So
Agree.
anytime like that, and that's always been my forte. With my former team, I was a historical researcher. I did
Yep.
spirituality research. So I think we should have more conversations. I think we all forget about the history. As investigators, I think our newest, generation of investigators are getting away from that. And I kind of am always out there saying, you got to do the history,
You got
man.
to do the homework.
Yeah, do the homework, learn, because there's so much that we can prove and disprove by
Yep.
knowing our history of locations. So, and that's why I was so excited when you agreed to come on, because I really wanted people to understand the importance of storytellers and of history,
Hmm.
because there's
Absolutely.
too many people don't like to talk about it. And I'm like, nope, nope. I want to bring this up because to me it's like one of the single most important things. So, thank
Well, I
you
think it,
again.
yeah, of course. And anyone who's out there researching the paranormal, the history is a huge component. You
Yep.
have a really incomplete picture of any property or any story without it.
Our field in general goes back so far that people don't even realize how far paranormal investigating goes, and until they do the research.
Hmm.
And then I always tell people the paranormal field was literally brought in by women.
I see. Yeah, I don't think most people even know it was started by women.
Yeah, I said, you have to go back and look at the earliest paranormal books and where doppelganger and all these terms came from. They were coined by women.
Hmm.
So I that's one of the things that I discuss a lot, because those are the books that I started by reading. And so, actually one of the books I have now, I'm using a quote from one of the early women of our field that,
Was it the Night
talks.
Side of Nature? That one?
Yes, it
Yep.
is. That was one of the first books I ever read, and I actually lectured about it a few years ago,
It's a great book,
because it
and I
is a
think
great
more
book.
people should read it. Yeah.
Exactly, and that, and I'm utilizing that in my next book when I'm talking about it's like my paranormal world of it, my paranormal path to enlightenment. Because in the beginning of my paranormal career, it was more about the paranormal, and then as I've progressed in my paranormal career, I've really become enlightened in the things that are out there in the world, not just in the paranormal, but spiritually and occult wise.
No, I totally get that. I agree completely.
Yeah. So again, thank you for coming on. And like I said,
Yes.
guys, everything will be down in the description. So if you want to get a hold of Rissa, please do. Please check her out. Go to one of her talks. Go on a history walk with her, a ghost tour. Um, and follow her on Facebook, because she always has pretty awesome information about all of her classes on there. So definitely give her a shout out. And thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Holly. It was a
Okay.
pleasure.
Yep. I'll be right back. From our friends at Got Knockers, Strange Knocks Magazine. Strange Knocks Magazine is your ultimate companion for exploring the enigmatic corners of our world. Delve into the shadows with us as we uncover the mysteries surrounding cryptids like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and examine the tantalizing possibility of extraterrestrial life visiting Earth. Our pages are filled with compelling true crime stories that defy conventional explanation, alongside mind bending conspiracy theories that challenge the status quo. Whether you're a seasoned skeptic or a curious believer, Strange Knocks magazine invites you to expand your horizons and entertain the unexplained. With captivating articles, expert interviews, and reader submissions, each issue promises to spark your imagination and thrill your sense of wonder. Join us in our quest to illuminate the unknown, one strange knock at a time. From our friends at Got Knockers Strange Knocks magazine, read the description for further information. Make sure and check out our merch store at Bonfire. We are a Bonfire verified creator. Link will be in the description.